On September 22nd, 1997, on live WCW Nitro, Hugh Morris entered the ring to face a virtual unknown named Bill Goldberg. He had a shaved head, had an impressive look, had black tights, and just stared and just stood right here and was like, I'm going to do something that nobody would expect. And he did. He beat Hugh Morris, who was by no means a main eventer in WCW, but had a name, had the whole laughter thing. Because he was humorous. What? Is that humorous? What? Oh, wait, that was years later. But he was a name. And Bill Goldberg came from literal obscurity. Nobody had heard of him, and he beat Hugh Morris. Beat him flat. Absolutely impressing people. Didn't talk to Mean Gene. Walked off. And from there, September 22nd, 1997, the streak was born. And it kept building and building and building. Even though the first few months were rough, Bill Goldberg was becoming a household name. Goldberg, 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 U.S. champ, world champ. He was on top of the world. He was basically helping keep WCW neck and neck with WWF at the time, now WWE. During the Monday Night Wars, they were going head to head, boom, 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 boom. Even though he couldn't really have long matches unless it was with the right people like DDP at Halloween Havoc 1998. And even though, yes, they were piping in some chants, still, the crowd loved Bill Goldberg. Oh, the Goldberg, Goldberg chants. And then that streak, the 173-0 streak, came to a screeching halt at Starrcade 1998 when they decided to make Kevin Nash versus Goldberg a no DQ match. And after a cattle prod, a stun gun, whatever it was, from Scott Hall, posing as one of the security guys, the streak was over. They killed the Golden Goose, as Bobby Heenan said. And from there, we got to the finger poke of doom, and then WCW really started crashing down. In fact, after Super Brawl 9 in the following February, they didn't have a pay-per-view that got that many buys. They just kept sliding further down into obscurity. And even though Goldberg wasn't what he once was, had his streak been kept alive, what would have happened? Could his streak have kept going into 1999? Well, yes, but how could they have done that? What would the end game have been? Who would have benefited from beating the streak? There are a few scenarios, but, well, we got to get into the history first. So let's get to that, shall we? I'm John Rentham with my real honest thoughts on what if Bill Goldberg's WCW streak hadn't ended at WCW Starrcade 1998. Yes, that will obviously not be the full-on title because, well, that's a bit wordy. But nevertheless, what if his streak hadn't ended at Starrcade 1998? What could have possibly been the end game? Well, I got a few scenarios. But first, let's talk about the history. He was born on December 27th, 1966 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He talked about this on his biography. I'm not going to get into it. He was a Jewish boy, not treated all that well because he was Jewish, because people are bigots and weird and stupid. Why would you hate somebody because they're Jewish? Hate them because they're not a good person, if you want. Don't hate them just because they happen to be Jewish. What the hell is wrong with you, you anti-Semitic assholes? Anyway, so he played football. University of Georgia, played for the Atlanta Falcons. Had injuries. Got knocked out of football. His, basically his financial advisor told him, you might want to figure something out here. And he got into WCW because people saw him and he looked impressive. And look, Bill Goldberg still looks impressive. He looks very impressive. But at that point, he was in his early 30s. He had injuries, and he wasn't necessarily the biggest wrestling fan, but he had that great look. Got in developmental. Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker, little Napoleon short shit that he was. Got people ready. They just ran through drill instructor stuff. Didn't really train them to do all that much, even though the power plant was kind of revolutionary. And gee, I wonder where WWE got the idea to do that. Let's take a look at the setup. And oh, that's where they got it. But Goldberg hadn't been trained in the power plant all that long, and WWF was rising up as far as they were getting beat in the ratings, but their pay-per-views, after Mania 13, they were doing better. They were doing a lot better. They were improving. They had that solid foundation. They were making profits off pay-per-view and off of house shows. WCW, because of all the big contracts and everything, they were going to start to feel the heat, like it was the advertising campaign for Metro. Remember that Eddie Murphy movie, Metro? Wasn't all that good. I remember the advertising campaign. That's about all I remember. That being said, Bill Goldberg does show up. He actually did have a couple house show matches that he lost. Oh no, the streak never actually happened. But in all seriousness, as far as canon, On the famous night of September 22nd, 1997, he did beat Hugh Morris. And from there, even though he got into that weird feud with Mongo, it didn't go all that well. It was really, really strange. Really strange. The first few months of Goldberg on WCW television was kind of rough to see. But when he started smashing people, hitting them with a spear, hitting them with a jackhammer, rah, doing all that and everything, he had the look. He had the look, as Roxette once said. And from there, the legend of Bill Goldberg kept growing. They realized they had something with him. I believe Kevin Sullivan was quoted as saying, "Oh man, we found the diamond," and they did, because Goldberg had that natural charisma, that uncoachable it factor. You either have it or you don't have it, and he had it. So what ended up happening is, the Regal match. We could talk about that for a little bit. The fact that William Regal was basically, or Lord Steven Regal, he was told to give him a 6-minute competitive match, and that wasn't all that great, because Regal was a wrestler and a brawler, and Goldberg was not a wrestler. He could be a brawler, but he couldn't really do anything, and Regal was even quoted as saying, "Now I can't hit myself." Because British people saying the word can't will always be funny to me, because I'm a mature individual. And they embraced his weaknesses, like the fact that he couldn't really go that long in a match because he would be exposed. They had him just smashing people. Glacier took out the entire flock. He was beating Wrath. He was beating multiple people. He took out the entire flock and beat Raven for the U.S. Championship 24 hours after Raven had won said U.S. Championship. So now he won that right after Spring Stampede in 1998. And he's holding, he's all happy, all that. And then they really started building him as far as a challenger for Hogan. Oh, wait, no, they didn't. They didn't start building him as a challenger for Hulk Hogan, because the Georgia Dome show was coming up for Live Nitro in July of 1998, the very beginning of July of 1998. And on the Thunder, J.J. Dillon announced Hollywood Hulk Hogan is contractually obligated to face, in the Georgia Dome, the number one contender, Goldberg. And Goldberg even was quoted as saying, "Well, that's great. That's the first I heard of it." And what ended up happening is basically Hogan politicked his way into getting put in the main event spot, because he wasn't going to be booked on that show. They were going to have Goldberg on there, possibly defending the U.S. Championship. But Hogan wanted to latch on to Goldberg. But that's unusual, because Hogan never latched on to somebody to try to leech off their stuff or whatever, and nobody has done that since Chris Jericho and AEW, but I digress. Goldberg versus Hogan was a big money match. It was also blown off on free TV instead of on television. But Goldberg was like 100-something and 0. I think it was 107 and 0 by the time he beat Hogan. Big house, packed to the goddamn. I mean, it was only half capacity because they put a curtain down the middle. Could you imagine if they had actually hyped that thing up for a few weeks? Like if they had started hyping it up at Great American Bash? It would have been Great American Bash in June. They had started hyping it up. Tell me that they couldn't have put 50,000 people in the Georgia Dome. Tell me they couldn't have put 60. I mean, I'm not sure on the total capacity of the Georgia Dome, but I would imagine 60,000 probably was fair. They had 40,000 something people in the Georgia Dome, so it was impressive. Don't get me wrong, especially for a TV, for the TV executives that were looking like, oh great, all this money we're paying out. Look at all these people, we're doing great. WCW, as much as I love it, and I will do another what if about what if Bischoff's group had been able to buy WCW down the road. And as much as I love WCW, as far as a business model, they were set up basically as long as they kept packing the arenas, as long as they kept doing everything, mega sellouts, and as long as they kept everything at the goddamn fever pitch that they were at pretty much from later 96 through 97 and into 98, as long as that kept up for the rest of time, they were going to be able to make money, or at least until some of these contracts ran out. And then, of course, you had contracts like Bret Hart, by the way, my favorite wrestler of all time. And you had Goldberg building the streak. He was 107-0. He's a world heavyweight champion. And then he would still have pay-per-view matches where he wouldn't even defend the championship sometime. He did on Bash at the Beach 98. It was, I can't remember if it was Kurt Hennig or Conan. I think it was Kurt Hennig. I'm trying to remember. But that was on the undercard of Hogan and Rodman against Karl Malone and DDP, which was a big match. A big deal. And then Goldberg was part of the God, if I remember right, I think he was part of a battle royal on Road Wild 98. I don't even think that he was part of the Fall Brawl 98 card. They had to make room for Ultimate Warrior to have a trapdoor entrance where British Bulldog injured his back because nobody told the wrestlers not to land in a certain spot. Fuck the Ultimate Warrior, by the way. I'm glad he's dead. But the peak of his streak, especially, well, at least the peak of his world title run, was against Diamond Dallas Page. This is where the first scenario is going to come in. I'm going to kind of break tradition because usually I go through all the history. But DDP could have ended the streak, and in fact, I would argue that if anybody could have benefited from ending the streak, it would have been Diamond Dallas Page. They were ready for it. Goldberg had run his shoulder into the post literally because he always did everything full bore, even though he would always injure himself because he was just that intense and that insane. DDP countered out of the jackhammer, hit the diamond cutter. Go back and watch that match. And only that match, because unfortunately Halloween Havoc 98, especially after the first few matches, gets really, really tough to watch. Nash and Hall, Hogan Warrior 2, Electric Boogaloo, and various other things. But when Goldberg, because he had the injured shoulder, a legit injured shoulder, and DDP countered out of it, boom, diamond cutter, everybody was ready. Everybody was ready. They were like, you know what? Fine. That's cool. That's cool. He hit his finish. Nobody kicks out of the diamond cutter. He finally covers him. It takes a bit. 1, 2, and he throws his shoulder up. Now, he throws his shoulder up a little bit too soon after the 2 count. He could wait just a little bit, but he didn't. Still a great match, and Goldberg did end up winning. And there you go. And DDP would win the U.S. title from Bret Hart later that night. And also, not a lot of pay-per-view customers got to see that because everything ran long and the pay-per-view feed got cut. I remember that because I was watching it at a friend's house and we got to see it on a live Nitro. People were pissed. That was also the last time that WCW beat Monday Night Raw in the ratings. And then God, I don't remember what he did at World War III. I'm trying to remember. But Nash won the 3-ring Battle Royal. And then we go to Starrcade 98, where Bam Bam Bigelow, Disco Inferno, about 20 million people interfere. Scott Hall hits the stun gun thing, and the crowd pops when Nash hits a jackknife. 1, 2, 3, the streak is over. And then Nash had that. Nash actually wasn't booking until about February of 99. That is a misconception. Nash actually had it where he would have, had Nash been booking at that point, I don't even think Nash would have done that. But, like, was it a stupid decision? Breaking the streak was a stupid decision. It's the follow-up that they failed to capitalize on. Because had Goldberg come out, and had they established him as, had they not done the finger poke of doom, and had they had the group reunite, had they not done the finger poke of doom, had they done something where they could have had a closing segment and Goldberg looks like he's going to get revenge, and then, you know, everybody gets taken out, Hogan somehow wins the championship, and then they build that for that final run, or, you know, a big run, that would have been fine. You could have done a Bash at the Beach 99, and that certainly couldn't have hurt that card, because that had the Junkyard match, where Finlay got a legit leg injury and had to retire for a while and train a bunch of women that he damn sure made, you know, sure to instill in them the respect, and they absolutely learned, and they got a lot of respect for Fit Finlay. I believe Lita, Trish, and various others talked about how Fit Finlay really helped them, but shout out to Fit Finlay. I don't know why the hell I would say that. He's not watching this. Why would he? He's a busy man living off of his great reputation that he built up in this great sport of professional wrestling. But from there, Goldberg had, and this is what happened in the following months, and I'll get to the scenarios. Goldberg had a taser ladder match against Scott Hall at Sold Out 99. And then, I don't remember if he had a match at Super Brawl 99. Don't remember if he did. I know that he had some kind of surgery, or like needed some kind of rest because he had shoulder problems. Maybe it was a knee problem. It was one of those two. So let's put a guy with, you know, knee or shoulder problems in a goddamn ladder match. I mean, yeah, against Scott Hall, but Scott Hall at that point, well, it was dangerous to put him against somebody that had a track record of not being in the right headspace. And rest in peace, Scott Hall. Unfortunately, you know, demons led to a serious downturn in his health. I really wonder what would have happened if Scott Hall's demons hadn't gotten a hold of him. He'd been able to get him under control. Multi-time world champion, at least a one-time world champion. Let's get back to Goldberg. He did get revenge on Nash at... It was uncensored to Spring Stampede 99. You will forgive me if I'm starting to forget a couple different things or starting to mix up a couple things. Because unfortunately, WCW gets a little dicey at this point. And then they didn't know what to do with Goldberg. From there, even though they were going to try to build him up as a monster again, he did have his injuries, he did have his other stuff, and also the creative process with the impending AWOL Time Warner merger that started in early 2000, and then would come to 2001, and then at WCW Sin 2001, Goldberg would be done. Is after putting his arm through a legit window, not a gimmicked limo window. I'll just put my arm through it. I already did one about Starrcade 99 and what if Bret Hart hadn't been injured there and what if his career hadn't ended. Now let's talk about the possible scenarios. DDP ending the streak at Halloween Havoc 98 would have actually been pretty goddamn good. In fact, I would argue that among all the possible scenarios, that might have been the best one. If Nash had beaten him still, and you had done that thing with the taser, fine. Have Goldberg come out and destroy somebody the next night. Have Goldberg, or maybe keep him off for a week, have him come out on the January 4th show, have him destroy people, and say he's coming back for revenge. Keep it short, keep it sweet. Yes, eventually he needs to have longer matches, but if you keep it short, keep it sweet, and you don't spray paint him, beat him up, doing all that crap, and you just do some of the same things, but just keep it to where you're building him back up, because having his streak end wasn't the end of the world as we know it, and I feel a little bit gassy, but otherwise I feel fine. It's Patriotic Slam, fight. Okay, enough trying to work that song in. What basically ends up happening is if you build Goldberg up properly, then you can do something where he could win the title back in the summer and have another dominant run. He could have had a run until Starrcade 99, except Bill Goldberg would have run into the Russo problem, where Russo wouldn't know what the hell to do with Goldberg, because Russo never knew what to do with anybody. Because nobody likes Vince Russo. I wouldn't imagine his children would like him. But anyway, Goldberg's career stalled out quickly. Now, am I saying that Goldberg could have been the comparable force he was in, 98? No. But there were ways to do it. If you didn't go with DDP beating him at Halloween Havoc 98, and you could have done that, and you could have had DDP versus Goldberg at Starrcade 98, he could have beaten DDP, and you could have had Goldberg with a little bit more of an edge. Turn him a little bit heel. Turn him a little bit darker. Not full-fledged heel, but have him be a bit of a tweener. Because by that point, fans would have said, you beat our champion, you beat the people's champion, that kind of stuff. And then you could have had Goldberg go on a run from there into the summer. Nash could have beaten him there. And sure, it would have still, you could have done, something similar. You could have had a bunch of run-ins and everything, because everything was run-ins at that point in WCW. But Goldberg at least would have gotten a second run with the championship. He would have held it only for a few months before losing it to DDP, but then won it back at Starrcade 98 and then held it through the summer, or in the Bash at the Beach. A 6-month run would have been twice as long as the run that he ended up having, almost. And then who knows what you do with Goldberg after that, because the injuries and the aforementioned stuff with the creative. But let's say he'd beaten Nash. Now, he could have faced Hogan on the January 4th, 1999 edition of Nitro in the Georgia Dome, beaten him again, because Hogan at that point didn't need a world championship. Goldberg could have faced Flair. Goldberg could have faced Brett, and not injured him, by the way. And yes, I know Goldberg didn't mean to do that, but still, he was careless. He could have faced Scott Hall. They could have had the ladder match for the championship instead of having him for the taser, because you wouldn't have done the taser spot. He could have been the champion and still held on to his streak through the summer, maybe to Starrcade 99. Because then by that point, you could have had him lose. And then, if you wanted to do that thing where Brett, say, turned on him and Brett didn't get injured and all this stuff, and now we're getting into fanciful scenarios. Then Goldberg, if he had still done the limo thing and injured his arm, then you could have had him return in May, June of 2000, go on another run, never get the title back, but still be kept in a strong, place. Still be kept as a comparable force. Or you could have just done the thing with the taser and just completely ruined his momentum and the momentum of the company, because they were doing stuff, they were trending at least upwards enough and keeping mostly neck and neck with WWF. Yes, WWF was beating them in the ratings, but the aforementioned Nitro after Halloween Havoc, Goldberg Goldberg and DDP were able to, because of that pay-per-view main event on live television, on free television, they were able to get that rating, and there was still some good stuff. They won the overrun for the January 4th, 1999 edition. There were still, there was still momentum behind WCW. And if he had held on to the championship for a year, lost it, say at Bash at the Beach 99, I know I keep going back to that, he would have held it for a full year. If DDP hadn't beat him, say DDP didn't beat him, he goes on that run, and DDP gets another shot. DDP eventually beats him at Bash at the Beach 99, and there you go. Because if you think about what they did with the WCW Championship picture in 99, Nash wins it at Starrcade 98, loses it to Hogan on the, with the finger poke of doom. Hogan holds it to Uncensored 99, I think is what it was. Was it the barbed wire first blood cage match where, Flair bled, but the referee wasn't, it was basically set up for Flair to win. It was a really, really bad event. Really bad. I retro-reviewed it. Check that out. I've retro-reviewed a lot of WCW stuff. And then they had, DDP win it in that four-way match in the Tacoma Dome at Spring Stampede 99. Still didn't get to go to that show. Kind of wish I had, but is what it is. Tacoma Dome's a fucking dive, by the way. If you've ever been in the Tacoma Dome, fuck the Tacoma Dome. I'm sorry if you like the Tacoma Dome, but it's a really bad venue. It's in a bad neighborhood, bad parking, bad acoustics. I got to see Joan Jett and the Black Hearts and Heart there, so that was kind of cool. And El King opening for some reason. But they kept tossing the title back and forth. DDP would end up losing it to Sting, and then Sting would drop it back to DDP that same night. And then then Sting would have the championship again, or Nash would have the championship again. Nobody cared about any of this stuff at this point, and Goldberg was just doing what he was doing. Yes, you needed to build him back up if you were to end his streak, but if they were smart, they could have kept that going to at least the summer. At least go to Spring Stampede 99, have him lose there. Then he has the championship for a while, and you do some great stuff. You could do a lot of different things. Goldberg could have had multiple runs with the championship after that DDP loss at Halloween Havoc. Hold it from Starrcade 98 to the following Starrcade. Have Bret Hart beat him. Have Goldberg, if he gets injured, have Goldberg and Bret face each other. If Bret isn't injured. Have some lengthy programs going, but unfortunately WCW never wanted to do that. So ultimately, these are just some scenarios I came up with in my head off the top of my ass, so to speak. What do you think they should have done? Do you think Goldberg's streak should have ended at Starrcade 98? Should have ended at Halloween Havoc 98? How long should it have gone? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.